Welcome to the Todd DeVoe Show, exploring the best ideas and lessons for leaders.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in this fine land. And this is the Todd DeVoe Show. Well, part 2 for today. We're trying some new stuff out here, and sometimes new stuff doesn't quite work, but that's okay. We're here, we're live, and I have James with me today. James, welcome to the show.
For having me, Todd. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. Really an enjoyable experience. This is why we exercise, right? This is the exact reason why emergency managers should exercise every chance they get.
Absolutely. And like the best part about that's, the term I've always used since I was in the service, they see a lot lately, is Semper Gumby, right? Always flexible. You got to be flexible and don't let things keep you down, Oh man. So anyway, I had this really great poll question that we were going to use in the new system because, interactive, you could do polls. And so the question was, have you heard of the EMAP program, right? MEPP, right? And then, so I had yes, no, great class. And then the question was, I love James Beard. Does he give the awards out? So do you give out the James Beard Award? Because
I don't, but maybe that's something that we could maybe wrap into some of future courses, maybe for the Planning Practitioner Program that we're setting up. Maybe it takes place over a 2-year period. So maybe in 2 years we can give out the Best Beard Award.
Outstanding. So we're here not to talk about the EMAP program. We're here to talk about your new program that you have up. I'm really kind of excited about it because, we've we had those long conversations regarding planning. What's it really mean? And I know, like a lot of people, we say, "Hey, James, do you have a plan for, I don't know, cybersecurity or something?" And you go, "Yeah, sure. Here's the one I worked on that I got from my friend down over Virginia, and this guy got it from somebody over and wherever." So it's like this plan kind of goes around the loop, and then we Control H, remove James, and enter Todd, and then here's my cybersecurity plan. Is that how planning should work?
I would venture to say no. And really, we've worked really hard over the last year and a half on developing a new program for the emergency management community, specifically emergency management planners. That's a huge bulk of the work that we do in the blue sky time is planning work. And we definitely need to do a better job of it. As things get more complex and as our risks become more complex, it doesn't make our life any easier on the planning side. So really, this new curriculum that we're putting out at FEMA EMI is for planners, and it's a pretty substantial program, and it takes a lot of effort. And I'm excited to get out to voyage here with the rest of the community. So I appreciate you having me on again.
Absolutely. Now you've gone through a couple of practice or what do you call them? Not pre courses. What are they called? What do you call them?
We do pilots.
Yeah. That completely left my head. Yeah, the pilot courses. Thank you. And you said they're well received. Let's talk about the pilot courses a little bit and what you learned from them.
Right. So I want to say that we started with a very broad scope in the sense that everybody does planning, whether you do planning in the mitigation realm, whether you do planning in response or recovery. We wanted this program to really be applicable for everyone and kind of look at planning as a methodology that you can use in order to solve problems. And that methodology really boils down to the Comprehensive Preparedness Guide, CPG 101 6-step planning process. And we kind of use that as a methodology in which to kind of scope the course. So regardless of what type of planner you are, what background, what roles and responsibilities you have, what level of government you work at, you're going to take something away from this course that's going to be really useful to you in your day job. So we did a lot of work in the pilots. We had a lot of smart individuals working on it. This whole thing was built during COVID. And relying on emergency management subject matter experts was difficult during that time. I think we were all very, very busy, but I had a wonderful group of folks that do planning every day, day in and day out as part of their jobs, and really took a step back and say, what do you do every day? What does that look like? And what are the underpinning concepts behind that that make you more effective? And how can we turn that into a training program to support the emergency management planning community?
No, that's awesome, and I think it's exciting because we do need to have some more concrete, hands-on experience with planning. Because I think sometimes what occurs, throughout the years, is it's been like, well, you can type well, like you know how to wordsmith. You're an English minor, like when you went to school. Well, you're gonna be the plan writer, and like these people are like, oh my gosh, I don't know the first thing about plan writing. And just sort of get thrown into it. And I'm glad that we now have a formal class to go through to help people that are actually in that profession. Because now we've talked about this in the past, the idea that with emergency management, even though we do have generalists, right? Like if you are working for a small town where you might be an office of one, but realistically, even with somebody like that in a small community with one employee, we really need to start bringing in or experts in the fields of different things. And are we seeing like this idea, like you brought up, and I'm going to steal your analogy of it, right? Of like going to like a medical doctor or a lawyer, right? So you go to school and you become a lawyer or a doctor, right? You become a general practitioner or a general attorney, and then you go into specialties, whether it's constitutional law or, with medical, it's, ER, emergency room medicine, all these different boards. Is this what we're seeing the profession of emergency management kind of going to?
Todd, I'm not 100% sure. That's probably more for the academics and the practitioners to really figure out. Being the training wing, I don't usually get an opportunity to kind of make policy or push the field forward. But what I do see is the aperture of emergency management is very, very broad. And it deals with a lot of complex issues and a lot of complex problems. And I've always said this about myself, so I'm blue in the face, but I don't consider myself an emergency management expert because I just don't have the mental bandwidth to understand every nuance of everything that falls within emergency management, because it is such a broad field and there's so much specialized knowledge under each one of these different program areas. But I really think that's probably something for the practitioners and the academics to work out instead of me. But hopefully we can add a little bit to planners who are doing that as part of their main day job currently within their different jurisdictions, and that's really the goal.
And James, I'm happy as an academic to take on that task of expanding what it means to be an emergency manager for sure. Eileen says, while working on COVID vaccination sites, we were asked to develop a thermal stress prevention plan. I don't even know what the heck that is. And I reached out and received a number of plans, all the same with just the names of the nearest site changed. But it was not a prevention plan. It was a response plan. And I had to rewrite the plan to be a prevention plan. That's the problem, right? And I really would like to learn more about the thermal stress prevention. Is that a heat? Is that like a heat stress? Like physical I need more information on that. I'm going to have to look that one up. But
I really love that example because it doesn't really matter what the problem set is. If you have a methodology to run through it, it actually kind of helps, right? Hey, I have this wicked problem that I need to solve for. It doesn't matter what that problem is. Is there a way, a process that I can go through, a thought process, and really, looking at operational planning through the aperture of the 6 steps of the planning process. I need to make my team. I need to get them together. I need to understand what the problem set really is and all the different variables that come with it. I need to determine what's my goal here. What's the solution? How do I find that particular solution? There might be multiple ways to answer a problem. And then I actually put that solution on paper and then I implement it, right? So it's just thinking things through a methodology, right? And just because I'm given a problem and I'm given a plan to change, we usually don't even change the plan until step 5 of the planning process at the very end. That's actually where we actually write the plan and find the right format for the problem set that we're trying to answer. So, I mean, although it's kind of an interesting example when we talk about planning during crisis, where we don't have a plan necessarily to pull from, but just going through a methodology or a process and having the right stakeholders at the table as you're going through that process is going to help solve those problems.
Yeah, and I think that's the part I think of planning that we miss, right? And what I say by that, the collective we. So we go to the idea of like, okay, Eileen has to do this plan, here it is. And she says in there, it's heat stress for workers. That's what I figured it was, but it's just a fancy name for that. Thermal stress prevention plan. Got it. So the idea is like, here she gets tasked with this, she gets put in the corner to type out a plan. But it really isn't the paper, this document that we put on our bookshelves, that is the important part of it, right? It's the process. Talk about that process and why it's important to bring other stakeholders into that program.
Absolutely. So, going through the development of the course itself, we talked to a lot of subject matter experts across the field, and two things really, maybe 2 or 3 things really put their foot forward as being super important for planners across the spectrum. The first is project management. We found project management to be a really heavy hitter as far as what people are really desiring and trying to implement the principles of project management into the planning process. And then the other was just stakeholder management. So being a good planner is really being a good leader of a large group of disparate stakeholders that may have their own thoughts on a particular matter. They may be coming from different backgrounds, have different subject matter expertise, and basically drawing from them and facilitating that group is a huge part of producing a successful plan. So we do talk a lot about that in the program itself. What's the process of selecting stakeholders? How do I do that more efficiently? How do I get them on board more efficiently, right? Because maybe in a particular jurisdiction, sitting in a particular chair, I may not have the authority to force people onto my planning team. So how can I do that more effectively to get people more involved and more engaged in developing a plan? And then the other part of it is really understanding the question at hand, right? What is my risk? What am I solving for? And how do I do that more efficiently? So I think those were some of the big things that came out of that, and they do get addressed throughout the curriculum in different ways and at different touch points.
That's great. And I think as long as you're encouraging and really helping people walk through that process and having them know what it is to create that planning process, sometimes that's the step in the right direction, right? Because we go through this concept of going, okay, this is what we need to do, but how, right? The how is it? And are you helping people work through the how of the planning process?
Absolutely. I mean, that's really just to kind of give you an overview of where the curriculum kind of takes you on this journey. The first course is the E0237, which is planning theory and application. So how do I take all these different pieces of plan theory, put them together and apply it to a particular problem set? So the best way that I could explain it is that course really looks at how do I solve for a particular problem. And I look at the plan as a particular project. So it's one singular project that I'm working on. And how do I coordinate a lot of different stakeholders, especially on horizontally? So all these different agencies in my jurisdiction, how do I bring them together to the table to solve for a problem? The second course is the E238, the Planning Integration and Contemporary Issues. And that's where we get into a lot of other portions of looking at planning as an entire program. So not just one single plan, but the multitude of different plans from all the different mission areas and core capabilities, and how can we be more efficient in that? And then also looking at planning as kind of the beginning of the preparedness cycle, and how does it drive the rest of the preparedness cycle, and how can we be more efficient in doing that? one of the other things that we kind of discuss in that course is how do we actually make the national preparedness goal a reality every day, right? The national preparedness goal is a really high standard to reach. And what does that look practically through looking at all levels of government, nonprofits, the private sector? How do we integrate with one another to make sure that there's no gaps in how we protect and respond in our communities?
I think that's kind of the idea here, and this is one of the things I wish if I could snap my finger and make the world a better place, right? Is that we should be using plans as a guiding principle, emergency operations plans, and the planning process that emergency managers go through, whether it's hazard mitigation, all the different plans that we have out there. There really should be the guiding principle of how organizations and governments make some decisions, right? What I mean by that is not like decisions of like whether you're going to put a park in or whatever, but the idea is like when Houston, I pick on Houston a lot, and I'm sorry, but there's just has some issues over there. When they're building out communities, they have this map that says reservoir under it, right? And they still build communities in the reservoir and it's flooded out. They're like, oh, I can't believe it flooded. Well, I mean, it's right there in the map. It says that this is what this area is meant for. Did they check out? Did they check out what it meant? Because when we have plans today, when you go through the planning process of building the building, you have to go to the planning department and they have to take a look at it and they have to approve it. Then you have to go through the fire department and get that checked out through as far as for fire safety. Why shouldn't it stop through emergency management and compare things going? And I know this is beyond what we're talking about today, but that's just when we're writing, my point about that is when we're writing plans, we need to involve everybody in the process in the organization, because we should be using this as a principal document of how we make decisions.
Absolutely. I mean, that really does boil down to like, what do you want to do with the risk that you have? We've identified the risk. We've gone through the process of figuring out what our risks were, and we racked and stacked them through the THIRA process or an SPR, and we know what they are, but how do we systematically look at solving that problem? Can we reduce the risk? Can we offload the risk through insurance and give it to somebody else? Can we, are we actually going to accept the risk? And that's really where your EOP comes into play is, that jurisdiction or a community has decided to accept that risk as it stands, and now we have to plan operationally against it. So it's actually asking those questions on the front end and saying, I would love if, mitigation could put response out of a job. That's probably a perfect world, right? But how do we move the needle of preparedness forward through the planning that we're doing in all of these different mission areas, right? How does mitigation impact response, impact recovery, all the way down the line? So how can we do a better job in our communities of taking a step back for a moment and looking at the full scale of our preparedness programs and all the plans that we produce and be more efficient and thoughtful about it? And every community is different. I don't know what your community faces out in California. I know some of the risks that I have here living in South Central Pennsylvania, completely different. And it's not really a place for me to be able to tell you how to do it, but to take a step back and really think about what your community needs and how we can be a little bit more deliberate in how we plan against risk.
Come on, James, you don't know what every community's problems are and risks are? I'm very disappointed in that answer, sir. It's like
but you do. So when you come to the class,
I do. Yeah, I do. I know, dude. I know everything that could possibly go wrong. Oh man, that'd be beautiful if you did, but also scary at the same time. How do people get involved? How do they find you, and how do they come and take your courses?
Absolutely. So we just released our next fiscal year schedule. We're going to have 2 full cohorts. You have to take the courses in order. So you take the planning process theory and application, the planning integration contemporary issues right after that. And then we actually require a capstone on the back end. It is a pretty big commitment. So basically, you're going to take a lot of the lessons that you've learned in the classroom through discussion and through practical application through Central City, and actually take it back to your jurisdiction and put it into action. So that's part of the capstone. You have a year to complete the capstone on the back end. So it is a pretty substantial time commitment, but I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. So you can go to training.fema.gov. Right down, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see training announcements. It should be pretty much close to the top there. It should be PPP FY23. Click on that, give you all the information you need for applying. Some highlights though, make sure you have the prerequisites done. We ask for a one-page narrative statement that kind of asks about your qualifications and actually committing yourself to the 2-year time frame it takes to complete the program. And then we also ask for a one-page letter of recommendation from your supervisor or a supervisor in your jurisdiction saying that they're aware that you are want to attend, and they're going to support you through that process, especially for the capstone process, because you're going to take that back to your jurisdiction and work on it. So it's nothing too in-depth, but we do want to make sure that we're getting students that have an active planning portfolio, because that's part of the course. So when you take it back to your home jurisdiction, you need to apply it to an active planning portfolio that you may have. So training.fema.gov, scroll down, we have a training announcement right there. Should be right at the top of the stack. So I really am hoping we get a lot of folks that apply, and we are very thoughtful about creating a classroom environment. We want planners from all different levels of government. We want planners that have different planning sets. We don't mind if you're a small county emergency manager, a big city emergency manager. We want that wide aperture of different types of jurisdictions sitting in the classroom and learning from one another.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure that the individual courses, I know that we have the general course stuff in the show notes, but we'll make sure that is added to it as well. I think that's a good idea. So that being said, so at the end of the day, when you take this course, you're coming out with a product that your jurisdiction can use. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, basically. So everybody's in a different cycle when it comes to what plans they're working on at a given moment in time, right? One jurisdiction might be on an EOP, a mitigation plan, a certain annex. So really, we want you to apply the project management skills that you learned in the classroom and apply them to actually systematically create a plan to plan, if that makes sense.
Yes.
We also ask a few other different things. We talk a lot about systems thinking in these courses, and actually physically creating system maps in these courses, which is pretty interesting. It's another way of looking at a problem set and different points of data and how flows happen between them. It's a wonderful tool in your toolbox to have. So there's a lot of things that you'll get out of the program. I think there's 3 big things. First, you're going to leave a better planner than when you showed up. Secondly, you're going to make an amazing, have an amazing network of peers that you've spent time with in the classroom that you can rely on long after you leave the class. And then lastly is giving back to your jurisdiction. A lot of these senior leaders allow their emergency managers to come to EMI, and we're very grateful for that. The capstone is an opportunity for that time that they spent up at EMI to be given back to the jurisdiction through that capstone process to improve the planning that they're doing at any particular level of government.
Nice. And Joe Browning says, sounds like a great program. So I agree with you, Joe. It does sound like a great program as well. So, hey, for a little bit of fun, we're gonna bring in today's the first episode of the month, and when we do this, we have our book review with Mark Baker with the Baker's Dozen. Could you stick around and talk about a book review?
Sure. What's the book?
1 Second After.
Oh, okay. I have not read that one, but I'll stick around.
All right. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, Todd, how you doing?
doing well. It seems like we've been here before, but we'll go through this. And so James has not read the book, Mark. We're gonna have to rectify that. That's for sure. But give a little synopsis of 1 Second After and why you picked it for this month.
Yeah. So 1 Second After it's a story of a EMP attack on the U.S., which wipes out all electrical capability and all resources that require electronics to operate, and it kind of plunges society back into a kind of an archaic age, if you will, totally without the luxuries that we're used to, such as we don't have any lights anymore, we don't have any running water, and we can't produce the products and resources that we're used to having. And this community, it's a book focused in a small town, Black Mountain, North Carolina, and it's that small community struggle, right? The lights.
There we go. That's the lights. The lights aren't working. Awesome,
man.
It's perfect timing.
Twice. So yeah, it's their struggle to kind of adapt, overcome, and still retain some kind of continuity of government and organized way of managing that small community, despite the flow. They face challenges along the way. Food, obviously, water, obviously, those are going to be primary challenges. Medical needs. How do you address the medical needs? And then other influx of like refugees, if you will, from other communities looking for, the resources that community may have to offer. So it's a story of a challenge that's almost beyond thinkable, but I think if we take
I don't know about nowadays, especially with COVID, I think everything should be thinkable.
If you think about it's a high consequence, low probability event, but you're right. So was a pandemic, right? Before COVID. Exactly. So I think it's important that we, as practitioners, we do plan for it, and we do take measures to what if it and think about those extreme possibilities.
Absolutely. Like I said before, and for those that were on Bullhorn, you may have heard this conversation. And oddly enough, the light went out when Mark was doing it on Bullhorn too. It's almost like he planned it. I don't know if that's but the part I like about the book is the first few chapters. They talk about the city getting themselves organized, and they open up an emergency operations center with a group of people, look at the problem, trying to find solutions to the problem. And this before it gets, to the other side of issues that they have. And then I thought that was really kind of cool. And the fact that they had to go to this old library at the bottom of the college that's in the story, to find old manuals and old magazines of popular mechanics and stuff to try to figure out how to make things work, because they couldn't go to the University of YouTube to do it, So James, so in the planning side of things, on the exercise side of things, I know that we talked about exercise a little bit different than planning. Do you see like wide events like this that the probability of them happening are very low, but all the problems that come along with it are very high? Is this a good exercise that you'd want to get involved with?
No, absolutely. I mean, I spend quite a bit of my time thinking about the low probability, high consequence things that could possibly happen out there. And really, I think sometimes we get into a habit of saying, hey, that could never happen. And that's just a very dangerous place to be, right? The only reason it hasn't happened, it just hasn't happened yet, whatever that case may be. And even tying it back to the curriculum, we talk quite a bit about critical infrastructure and what that means to the communities, and how can we better mitigate those risks to particular critical infrastructure in our communities, and actually thinking about what are the second and third order consequences of losing something, right? And that's where that system mapping kind of comes into play. Is there's second and third order consequences for losing a particular piece of critical infrastructure. And maybe you don't think it's critical, but maybe it's a critical piece of infrastructure for the country, and you're just not aware of that, right? and what are the downstream effects of that over the long haul, and what can we do to ensure that we can either mitigate it or respond to it in a streamlined way. No, absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things I found, and Mark and I talked about this on the Bullhorn, so if you guys want to hear it over there, you guys can grab it as well. But one of the things I found very interesting about the book was they talked about psych medications running out, and then the conversation came into suspension of rights, and on the idea of could you round up everybody who was taking psych medications before they have problems, and the academic conversation I had in my head with that was going, okay, as a libertarian leaning guy, you go no, because the freedoms of liberty of an individual is most important. But then on the other end of it, if they start going crazy because their medication's done, like they start going, say schizophrenic, how do you handle that? And I thought that was a really interesting conversation that they held through the book. So, and again, it says it's the cascading events created by one simple event that has all these other questions that kind of came up. And I do highly recommend anybody who is an exercise practitioner or looking at different ways of thinking planning scenarios to read the book. And there's a write-up on the newsletter. If you're not a subscriber to the newsletter, it's on Substack, and it's the Emergency Management Network. And check that out over there, and you can see what Mark wrote about that. Mark, thank you so much for your time today. Well, everybody, we're at the end of the show. James, again, it's always a pleasure speaking to you, and thank you for working through as Eileen points out, Murphy's Law did attack us today. Thanks for working through that, and I'm glad everybody was able to get on the show today. And what do you got going on here in the near future besides the planning class? Anything exciting happening?
Oh, that's my main baby right now. I appreciate you having me on for today. I'm also working on some other exercises myself. So if anybody's interested, we also have a Master Exercise Practitioner Program, and we have integrated emergency management courses. So there's a million different programs running around EMI at a given moment in time. So if you're looking for training and education, please go to training.fema.gov. We'd love to have you either take an IS course or come to campus and join us for a course in Emmitsburg. So it's been a pleasure to talk to you, Todd. I really appreciate you having me on.
Anytime, but hey, stand by. We're gonna let you go but don't go too far. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for sticking with us through our technical difficulties. It's always a pleasure to have you here on Thursdays with us, and it is really important to keep your training up and going. And EMI is a wonderful place to go. If you've never been to the campus, I highly recommend finding some courses that are out there. It's a wonderful place. You get to meet some really great people. The networking events that are up there are outstanding, and it's a beautiful part of the country. So everybody, thank you so much for being here. Follow us on your favorite podcast player. Actually, follow us on Bullhorn. I know we'll get through that system over there as well. And you know what? Until next week, everybody, please stay safe and stay hydrated.